That's where a lot of the insight comes from. And you don't get that by sitting in a lab, right? This is a generational shift that has to happen for us to remain successful. Trump is not signing every purchase order for the DoD.
Yeah.
It's not happening, right?
You're one of like the godfathers of the gundo there.
We need to build the integrations so that those systems can operate as the experts in their field.
There's only like a dozen of us that have been doing this for 10 years, right?
Yeah, we didn't change the culture of the country. We just made it sexy again.
Is there a defense tech bubble?
Yes. Hey, my name is Zane Mountcastle. I'm co-founder and CEO of Picogrid, and you're watching the Drone Wars podcast.
Zane, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You are the first official guest in the brand new worldwide Drone Wars podcasting studio.
I'm honored.
And it's nice and hot in here already, and we haven't even started talking. So thanks for coming down from El Segundo. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background and what do you build?
Yeah, so I'm Zane Mountcastle, co-founder and CEO of Picogrid. We're a defense technology company that builds products to help integrate different systems. You can think sensors, drones, robotics, satellites, and all the digital platforms the military is building out, making those things work together at scale in ways that right now are extremely difficult most of the time.
And why is it so difficult right now?
Oh, that's a really... there's many layers to that question. I think the sort of long story short is the military just has built out a lot of exceptional capabilities over a long period of time that were always built independently, right? And so you have, great drone systems, you have great sensors, you have great command and control systems and digital applications, and all these tools were built out. And actually, a lot of them have really exceptional capabilities. The challenge is integration is often an afterthought, right? Of making those things work together at scale, some sort of broader network. At the same time, for the last 15, 20 years, the military's been pushing this concept of joint all-domain command and control, right? It's gone through many different iterations. It's going through its latest iteration right now. The broader concept, though, has remained the same, which is we just want our things to work together, right? It's a fairly simple concept, and it seems like it should be obvious.
Yep.
That's to say that we're far from achieving that vision, right? We continue to build platforms in silos. We continue to make things not work together, and it kind of gets out to operators out in the field. They end up with a dozen different systems, all from different manufacturers that don't work together. And now some operator who's stressed and hungry and under fire it's their job to now try to figure out how to make all this stuff work together. And you can imagine how difficult that would be, right? How difficult that would be under the lowest pressure circumstances, much less high pressure circumstances. And big reason why we exist is to help build the infrastructure and the tools to make those things work together. So your operator can give intention to systems, right? Move over here rather than take all my 12 systems and run some really complex mission kind of one by one.
So in the decade I've been, unfortunate enough to sell to the DoD, JADC2 or making everything work together has literally, it's incredibly well staffed. Mm-hmm. They throw big dollars against it. What's the biggest impediment today?
I think it's not for lack of trying. And I mean, the DoD spends truly billions of dollars trying to solve this exact problem every year with very, very little to show for it. I think the biggest impediment is just the business model and how the companies in the industry work, right? I think it's not obvious. And this is one of the things that, tracing back before starting the company, I was one of those companies that was building sensors and autonomous systems for the military. These were very early experimental systems for the Army Corps. And the tech got to the stage where then the next step was now integrate this into the battle networks, integrate this in the command and control systems. And that leap was an insurmountable challenge. And not just for me, right? I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room. But I saw this happen again and again and again for a lot of different companies and capabilities, small and large. And, I kind of dug into it. It's like, okay, this seems like an obvious problem to solve, right? We as the broader populace, we will do better if all of our things work together. Mm-hmm. And so, I kind of naively, went off and just really dug into this question, right? Why is this not the case? And we were originally working with, base defense applications. And so, maybe I told myself like, hey, like maybe these guys don't have the tools, but like, special operators with all the cool stuff, they have the tools. They have those systems. And the more I dug into it, I realized like this is a problem that we see across every single mission set, right? To varying degrees, but it's a problem across every mission set. And so, kind of dug into that as, okay, why is this the case, right? And when you look at how the companies that dominate your industry are, right, your big five primes, but also, all your mid tiers and everything else, right? Their position in the industry is to build the widgets, right? These are fundamentally hardware development companies. And it's not to say that's not a derogatory term by any measure, right? Look at like the B2 or the B21 or the F35. Like these are exceptional machines that do their job incredibly well. But the way that they operate is because of how the consolidation of defense in the 90s, you ended up with these massive conglomerates, right? Even your companies that we think of, like Lockheed, that's like the aerospace company, they also do a whole lot of everything else, right? Yep. They build their sensors and they build their software, they build everything else, right? And so you have these major programs where you'll have 3 or 4 of these major primes and a bunch of other small vendors competing on these specific problem sets, right? We were working with one of the major primes on an air defense program where they're competing against a number of other large primes. And then the question came up of, hey, company X, would you use your competitor's integration or command and control system that you're directly competing head to head on this program for? And of course not, right? Like one, right. You're not going to give them the insight as to how your system actually works. But 2, you're also just not going to help your direct competition, right? And so that's when they ended up coming to us. Is like, hey, we're building a system in a way that we as a company, we're not building your interceptor drones or your air defense systems, right? We're building the integration layer, which is increasingly important and actually increasingly a requirement on many of these contracts, right? Where before it was a nice to have, now it's a need to have. And so, we had to build a company in a different way to get around that problem of like, we can't compete with our partners, right? As soon as we build a drone, great. Well, all of our, dozen different drone partners are off the table because we're now competing directly head to head with them, right? So you actually have to build a different company from the ground up to solve this problem. Otherwise, you end up doing what everyone else does, which is build your own silo, build your own little ecosystem, claim it's open, but no, one, oftentimes it's not actually open. But 2, your partners are sure not gonna give you that IP to do that integration on that deep level. I think that was kind of the insight of the impetus for starting the company. It was like there's a blank space here. The DoD's been yelling about this for truly decades, and it isn't a solved problem, right? And it can't be solved by your existing large vendors that are these hardware development companies. It has to be built by somebody else. And the shape of that company is something that's very new. And I think as we're seeing this proliferation of companies in the defense space, where now for the first time generation, we actually see a few hundred really legitimate vendors across all different sorts of domains. Like these are not, your typical small businesses. If those companies are to succeed, we need to build the integration so like those systems can operate as the experts in their field, right? They can be the experts in long range imaging. They can be the experts in short range reconnaissance. They can be experts in these different domains. But on a whole, your operators in the field are able to use them all together. That's kind of where we are as a company.
So how's the new administration? I assume you've had conversations with them. I think they've done a great job of reaching out to a lot of the smalls, right? What are they saying in how you're trying to tackle this problem?
A lot of the, obviously a lot of the conversations are fairly sensitive, but I think the administration, I think, has done actually a really good job of pushing forward a lot of these reforms that make it possible for new vendors in the industry to grow, right? I think that's a big part of us. Our thesis as a company is we've now passed the era of this massive oligopoly, right? We've passed the era of the big 5 primes eating, over half the contracts of the DoD, and now we're seeing this new proliferation. I don't think the primes are going to go away. The major primes are going to go away. They'll continue to exist. But we're seeing a new generation happen. And I think the current administration has actually done a really good job of really acknowledging that and fostering that, right? I think it's a good thing for the country for that to be the case, where you're not dependent on one vendor for, one core component, where for whatever reason that company dies, we're all kind of, up a creek, versus having many different providers of similar but competing capabilities, where you can generally swap different things out and still be able to accomplish the mission or accomplish the use case. And each of those companies can be very large and very successful and growing very fast. And so, we're in that spot right now where the administration's done a really good job of supporting that and recognizes that there's sort of a new game in town.
What do you think they can do to support that new game in town better?
It's a good question. The timelines of the ways in which things work do not align with the scale and speed that companies operate on. I was at a dinner last night with a bunch of founders from health tech and some of these other industries, and they were complaining about how difficult it is to work with insurance companies. And I was like, oh boy, you guys
wait till you hear what I deal with.
Yeah, wait till you hear. And I think they were kind of astonished to hear, right? Like in the defense space, you have to build your company sort of around your business development team, like in a way that's a big part of your growth. And you can build, and we've seen this happen many, many times where companies focus the other way, right? They focus on the traditional build it and they will come, focus on building really good tech, and they aren't able to sell it, right? And they severely underestimate the timelines to actually get a really good product into the hands of operators, and then from there into larger contracts.
Right.
And so I think what the government or broadly, like current administrations, but this is not a one administration problem. This is a many administration problem that we need to resolve, is increasing that pace. And if we increase that pace, we'll have many, many companies able to better serve this industry and serve our operators, and not just giving small contracts, but giving real contracts, right? Or it's a real contract for a small startup of say $50-100 million is a drop in the bucket for the DoD, but it is a tremendous opportunity for a small company. And something like that would completely change the game, right? Make some of those bets, which I wouldn't even call big bets for the DoD, right? These are pretty small bets.
Exactly.
Make some of these, small to medium bets on some of these vendors, give them the resources to grow and make real orders, and do so at speed, right? Not, hey, I'm going to order, 10 of your drones and then good luck surviving.
Yep.
Right. I'm going to buy 10,000 of your systems and we're going to use them in training exercise, and we're going to operate these at scale. Right. That's where we need to go to. And that's a function of just will and speed. We have all, I'm always hesitant to say we need more contracting mechanisms or we need more tools. It's we don't, right? We have OTAs, we have tons of contracting mechanisms. That's usually not the problem. It's just will, right?
Yep.
We can use them if we want to, but do we want to? That for us, that's the biggest sort of limiter on growth is just the speed at which these things can operate.
Do you think Hegseth will get there? I mean, it's every month we're seeing kind of the traditional power base get chipped away here.
It's hard to say, right? I think this is a problem that it goes extremely deep, right? This goes down to, I think there's only so much that operators or the individuals on the high levels can influence, right? You can push down a lot of policies, you can push down a lot of directives, but at the end of the day, these contract decisions are in the hands of sort of effectively middle management, right? Your contracting officers that have been trained and drilled into them for their entire career, that if you make a mistake, it's not that your career's over, you're going to jail. Right. And so you build in this extremely over conservative culture where there's actually very little incentive to drive progress.
Totally.
Right.
Just hit the easy button.
Hit the easy button, give another contract to Raytheon. They'll probably deliver eventually. Might be, twice the budget and twice the time, but they'll probably get it done. Right. The whole, the old saying of nobody gets fired for hiring IBM still holds true. Right. There are signs that things are changing. And I think Hegseth is a big reason why. But it's largely a culture challenge, right? It's not a policy challenge. It's not a financial challenge. It's a culture challenge where we have to instill the drive into these contracting officers, into these program offices, into these individuals that are making the on the ground decisions that are this is where these contracts come from.
Right.
They're not coming. I think the misconception about defense is you have a single buyer, right? Trump is not signing every purchase order for the DoD. Yeah. That's not happening, right?
Yep.
The DoD is not one vendor, and it's also not it's not the Army, Air Force, Navy. It's within those organizations. You have hundreds of different offices and customers of different sizes with competing priorities, with their own vendettas against each other. It's an entire industry, right? It operates very much the same way as any other major industry. And it's a culture challenge of instilling in all of those organizations this drive towards progress, right? This drive towards building new and better technologies, so we as a country can operate with the capabilities that we need to stay competitive in the world. And it's fundamentally a national security question. And I'm cautiously optimistic we'll get there, but it's not a short-term thing, right? This is a generational shift that has to happen for us to remain successful, right? And part of me is worried though that this wave will pass, the excitement will pass, and we'll kind of revert back to we'll be back in a nice comfortable oligopoly, and another generation will pass where we fall further and further behind our competitors on the global stage until it's too late.
How important do you think it is to get small businesses with novel technologies onto the battlefield and into the user's hands?
I think it's incredibly important, right? When you look at how, I mean, just look at your large firms, right? These are not, I think there's a lot of malignment against them in the broader defense tech circles, right? These are not bad companies. They don't have ill will. In fact, they're exceptional companies, build exceptional capabilities, and some of the brightest people in the world are there. The challenge is with any large organization, you build in, it's a networks question where you build in this conservativeness, you build in this slowness, you build in the challenges. And we've seen this happen with even the best non-defense tech organizations, right? Look at your Googles and Facebooks and those kind of companies, right? Like these are companies that within our lifetimes were the cutting edge of tech within their industry and have now fallen behind, right? And it's a function of how organizations and networks work. And so it's not that they're bad companies. That's to say, right, that where is the next generation being built? And it's not being built in Raytheon. It's not being built in Northrop. It's not being built in Lockheed. There are lots of great capabilities being built at those companies, but it's not the leapfrog capabilities. It's not the next generation, right? Mm-hmm. In the actual fact, a lot of it's responding to requirements that were written 5 years ago.
Yep.
So it's sort of by definition, these are not just current, they're behind the times, right? And that we can get into a whole discussion about defense requirements in that process, which is another whole challenge. But to answer the question of why should we push small companies towards this, and I'm hesitant to say small business because I think it has a certain connotation in the defense space. Mm-hmm. These are kind of your 10 to 12 person services companies that kind of do the busy work for the primes and don't really build that real stuff.
Yep.
But I would say small startups, right, to get their technology into the hands of operators, to get them into the field, gives them a taste for what actually matters. And that is super, super, super important for these companies to continue to build and operate at speed. And I think, it's something I believe very strongly is that's what's actually going to make the difference in the long run if we are to stay competitive.
Drone Wars is recorded from Firestorm's global headquarters in San Diego, California. Each episode is filmed inside our X-Cell, a modular industrial-grade manufacturing facility designed to be deployed anywhere in the world within 24 hours for on-demand drone production. Each week on the podcast, we bring you cutting-edge insights from unmanned industry leaders. Listen as they share the breakthroughs and technologies they're working on, the hard lessons they've learned, and the bold predictions about what the next 5 to 10 years in unmanned systems and advanced manufacturing have in store for us. Enjoying the show so far? Then be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show. I want to shift gears here for a second now and talk about just the broader defense tech ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Okay. You're one of the godfathers of the gundo there, because you guys started your company kind of before it was sexy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I want to take this in a couple different directions, right?
Sure.
One, it's incredibly awesome to see how many young people want to actually go build physical products again, right? I don't know when you graduated from college, but I'm kind of the last generation, 2008, where everyone still went into consulting, banking, mm-hmm. doctor, lawyer. 2 years after that, everyone went into tech, right? Mm-hmm. So like Web 2.0 stuff. Yeah. We don't really see that right now. And maybe that's because OpenAI is eating the world. But talk to me a little bit about the excitement that El Segundo kind of just culturally has created around, deep tech and hard tech problems.
Yeah. It's funny, later today, there's an interview that's going to come out. I guess by the time where this is released, it'll be out. What's going on in El Segundo is sort of the title, which is a bunch of these, the companies that, 2 years ago, nobody had heard of, that decided we were going to make this a cultural movement. Yep. Right. And it was a pretty deliberate exercise. I think El Segundo kind of became the spearhead, but I think, what you're saying, and I think what you're saying is very valid, is that this really tapped into a broader sentiment, right? We didn't change the culture of the country. We just made it sexy again, right? We put a spotlight on something that was happening across the country, which is young people wanting to build real things in the real world for real industries. Right? Not your next B2B SaaS application where in the best case you add a point to the bottom line of a Fortune 500. If that's what gets you out of bed in the morning, awesome. Go ahead and do that. Right? I know for me, I could not spend the next 5 to 10 years of my life, working 80-hour weeks towards that goal.
Totally.
That wouldn't work, right? And I think we're seeing this happen across the board where people are getting fed up with that, right? They have this desire to build real things in the real world again. And that's not just defense, right? This is the entire, 90% of the GDP that's not SaaS.
Correct.
Right? That's defense and manufacturing, industrials and energy and water and these really hard industries that have been untouched for a long time. And the irony, right, which is when we first started the company, for us to raise our first round was extremely difficult.
Yep.
Because you don't build tech and defense. That just isn't a thing that we do. Right? It just there's no market there. I mean, I looked at it, I was like, okay, well, that was $800 billion were spent this year. Hard to say there's no market, right? It might be hard, but like there's some money being spent out there, right? Which honestly makes a lot of like these SaaS applications that like in the best case, their total addressable market is like $1 billion. It makes those look sort of like silly in retrospect, right? And I think it's to say like there's a huge opportunity there, but it means you have to touch the real world. It means you have to build hardware. It means you have to like operate in the physical space. And of course, software is a big way we actually deliver all that. It's a big enabler for what we're doing, but it's this desire to build real things again. And this is something that we see out of the best and brightest coming out of the colleges today is that desire and that drive. And that is, I think, really exciting for the country. And of course, El Segundo kind of became a bit of the guiding light for some of this stuff, and there's exceptional companies in that are being built out right now in El Segundo, but it's a broader trend that's happening across the country.
What kind of advice do you give a lot of these young startups? I mean, I know a number of founders that I help mentor that packed up their car and drove from the East Coast and like just. I'm going to go to El Segundo and figure it out, right? And I'm sure 10 times more than I do. Yeah. What advice do you give them if they want to actually build hard tech companies?
I mean, I think it really depends a lot on the industry, right?
Let's focus it in defense then. How's that?
Yeah, and so in defense, I would say very much start lobbying earlier than you think.
My man.
Way early. I wish we started earlier.
First hire, right?
Yeah. So start that. Look at your BD team as your product. I hate to say it, like as an engineer at heart, it pains me to say like, look, like obviously if you build a really good thing, you'd hope that it would work out. In defense, there's way too many sort of horror stories of that not working out. So you have to look at it as part of the product and invest in it early, build it out, put a lot more resource in there than I think feels instinctive, especially as an engineer by background. And get your tech into operators' hands as soon as possible, right? Make that put aside some of your funding and decide we're gonna put this into flights and materials and shipping and logistics and everything we need to do to get it out into operators' hands, to be there in the field, to learn from real people. You learn so much more there in a day than you're gonna from months of kind of hacking in your lab, right? So it's all a lot of simple things, right, that add up to make a big difference, right? Okay, how do these two things snap together, right? Well, in my nice air-conditioned facility, it was really easy. When I'm out in the desert and it's
in the middle of the night, it's 40 degrees or 150 degrees.
And you haven't eaten in 24 hours. Totally. You're sleep deprived, and you're just trying to make these two things work together, and you're like a little ape, right? Like your brain operates in different ways in these conditions.
Totally.
That it's like this is one thing that we like for engineers still today. We'll make them go out into some of these deployments, into some of these operations, because it gives you that empathy for what the operators are actually dealing with in a way that you can explain all day, but it's not intuitive. And so I think that's probably the biggest advice, and a lot of it kind of ties into what are the specific problems these companies are working on. But focus on the things that are not engineering a lot more than you think.
You heard it from the OG. Get a lobbyist. Your GDM, your go-to-market team, your BD team is crucial. And then basically find those gold star customers that you can interact with every single day or as much as possible. It is really incredible when you build something in a warehouse and then you don't understand how an end user is going to use it in the field. Like, one, more products can actually come out of how you see things being used. But two, like, if you can simplify their life, they will become the biggest proponents of your technology. They almost become an extension of your team.
Right.
You know what I mean? We used to call them field support engineers 10 years ago. And now they're, like basically embedded engineers. I mean, there's a reason the General Atomics, the Andurils, the Lockheeds of the world all do this, because you'll build a better product.
Mm-hmm. It's also, I mean, for building future products, I think it's a big thing. Or a lot of our sort of next generation products have come out of direct conversation with users in the field, where they're like, "Hey, have you thought about this?" Or, "Hey, I have this problem. I know it's not what you guys do, but can you, like, would you be able to solve it or help me out?" That's where a lot of the insight comes from, and you don't get that by sitting in the lab. You get that by being in the field and just having conversations and building trust with real people. And that is in itself an incredibly valuable R&D tool.
We sent our first Excel to plug Firestorm for a minute here to an exercise in February in the middle of the desert. We fixed 15 other people's vehicles. We printed hundreds of repair parts, and all of a sudden we're like, holy crap, no one's actually had an industrial 3D printer in the field before. Yep. This fundamentally changes the system availability that's out there. And if we had not taken that to the field, we never would have just exploded our TAM, right? So, okay, let's ask the tough question here, though. Is there a defense tech bubble?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely a defense tech bubble. I think there's a lot of money going into companies. I'm not going to name names, right? But there's there's some companies, I think, with really good marketing that just don't. Some of them actually have really good product that like haven't been able to crack the code on specific offices or specific customers, and like to actually translate that into real large contracts. And I think you'll see some of these companies go up, and as like with any industry, right? There's some companies that fail, and like that's kind of part of the game, right? That's part of the venture world, and that's honestly okay.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's probably less of a bubble than people seem to think, because a lot of the big names people think of are actually like making real progress and doing real work in the defense space that are not going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
Right. And so even if one or two companies, including some big names, fail, there's a lot that's actually happening that makes it very real.
What kind of conversations do you have with VCs? I mean, and again, not like being pejorative here, but a lot of them are new to the space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you try and teach them or explain things to them? Because there's only like a dozen of us that have been doing this for 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's and like honestly, I want to say like I'm very, very excited to see a lot of these VCs and talent and just people that were previously like building crypto startups and whatnot.
They were hesitant, man. They wouldn't touch this.
They wouldn't touch it. And now, I mean, it was very much like socially not acceptable to be supporting the government and defense. And now it's completely flipped. And I'm really, really glad to see it. I think we're long overdue for that.
Yeah.
That is to say, like now you have a lot of inexperienced people. They might be experienced on the technical side, but not experienced on the BD side. And so there's a lot of kind of education that I have to give to a lot of these folks. One of which is, I think there's this tendency I've seen with VCs to try to extrapolate the lessons from enterprise SaaS or enterprise sales to the government.
Yep.
And it's you end up in these kind of circular kind of logic patterns that make it really difficult to actually make certain progress in defense.
Yeah.
Because you're just assuming, hey, defense is a large enterprise.
Yep.
And I guess in theory, yes, it is. But you scrap all of that thinking, because you have to build everything from the ground up. Completely reshape how you're building your company. The same thing with tech, right? There's this kind of, honestly, it's now a joke in the hard tech community. Like, why don't you just build the software, right?
Yeah.
Because that worked in a previous generation, right? But like you have to look at it as, previously when you're selling enterprise SaaS to companies where every person in that company spends their entire day on a computer.
Exactly.
You don't have to sell them the computer, right? When you look at the defense space, your operators are out in the field firing guns and shooting mortars, and yes, they have some computers, but like it's a very different world, and you have to, like, you as a company are required, if you're to make a sale, to help build out some of that infrastructure, right? Why do we build software as a company that builds data integration technology? It's because we cannot actually integrate in these systems out in the field unless we could be out in the field.
Exactly.
Right.
It's a little bit of a heavier lift.
It is. It's a heavier lift, and you have to not be afraid of doing that. And I've seen some companies kind of take that advice and like just build the software, and they're really struggling to grow, versus the companies that like, to hell with it, we're going to do it. Like us, even though it was very much against the what I think the VCs were looking for, we're growing much faster, right? And if you're doing the right thing, the margins in the defense space should make your hardware, the cost of the hardware disappear, right? It should be a rounding error if you're doing doing what you're doing right and you're providing enough value. But the hardware is that enabling tool to get out in the field. And that is something that does not compute if you've come from the enterprise like SaaS world. It just doesn't make sense because in that world, you're selling to people that already have all the infrastructure, already have all the tools to make that possible, right?
That's great. Thanks for coming today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. Each week, we bring you fascinating conversations with leaders shaping the future of air, sea, land, and space technologies. Catch new episodes every Tuesday wherever podcasts can be found. Until then, we'll see you next time.